Howdy, and welcome back to another episode of the Relationship Schools podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gaddis, and I'm here to help you with your love life, your family life, your work life in the context of relationships, right? There's, I don't think, any greater thing we can invest in than ourselves and our relationships to other people. It's so important right now. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your reviews on Apple Podcasts. I've got another one coming in here from John B. Thank you for getting all of this amazing content into the world. For too many years, I've lived by the mantra, at least I'm not as bad as blank, blank, blank. Meanwhile, my long-suffering wife has had to endure a marriage devoid of consistent connection and real intimacy. I'm realizing now that the tools needed for healthy relationship and friendship are not necessarily intuitive. They need to be modeled, inspired, taught, and practiced and practiced and practiced. Really listening to a bunch of your pods has helped me to imagine a new relationship landscape and encourage me to journey onward. I hope my wife and I will be able to model a new kind of love and friendship for our 3 kids and establish a lasting legacy for our family. Keep grinding, my man. Folks need to hear this stuff. Peace. Wow, that's so cool. Thanks, John B. Very, very sweet of you. So inspiring, man. If I was your kid, I'd be like, wow, look at dad. Look at dad go. Look at him on the move. Yeah, it's never too late, guys, to invest in yourself like this. If you want to leave us a review, please do. Apple Podcasts, just scroll down with your thumb on your phone. That's the easiest way. We're also on Spotify, YouTube. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's at Jason Gaddis. Yeah, and all the social handles, of course, Instagram, etc. All right. Yes, this episode is continuing our conversation about mental health given these times of COVID-19 and all that we're going through. There's many reports saying that there's a looming mental health crisis here coming up. And I would also add a loneliness crisis. So, man, because things are stressful right now for a lot of us, we tend to lean on and get support from our relationships. And if your relationships are compromised, it's sort of like you've got one hand tied behind your back right now because you, for whatever reason, took your relationships for granted or thought they were just okay. But to be around friends and a partner that can truly love you through anything and hold you when you're scared is really important. So in this episode, we dive into a little bit about relationships and specifically the mental health issues that some of us face, including depression. And I brought my friend Will on, Will Vanderveer, who's, this is his 3rd appearance or 4th appearance, I think, on the podcast. 4th appearance. Episodes 4 and 13 and 198, if you want to go back and listen to Will. 4 and 13 are specifically about mental health stuff, depression, MDMA treatment for depression. And we take that conversation a bit further here years later. So Will's a great, great friend of mine, an amazing human, and is doing incredible work in the world. He runs the Integrative Psychiatric Institute here in Boulder, Colorado. They run a year-long fellowship, he'll tell you about at the end, for doctors wanting to offer more integrative care in their practices. So he's a trailblazer, and he's really trying to change medicine and how we treat people. And instead of going after symptoms, Will is all about root causes. So he's a MD, doctor. He's got his MD from Vanderveer in Tennessee. He's got tons of psychotherapy training. He's a EMDR therapist, somatic experiencing. Yeah, and then he's just done all kinds of other cool trauma work. He understands trauma deeply. He understands PTSD. Will was on the MDMA clinical trials for MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. They are now offering ketamine-assisted psychotherapy in Boulder, Colorado, and Will's going to talk about what that is. It has some of the best outcomes for PTSD and depression. treatment-resistant depression especially. So if you know someone who's struggling with mental health, depression, anxiety, and is looking for alternative treatment modalities, this is the podcast to listen to, okay? We get into Will's history, training as a doctor, why he was trained a certain way, and why he's all about root causes as opposed to symptom reduction. So I think you're going to really enjoy this. So let's get into it. Here is Dr. Will Vanderveer. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Will Vanderveer.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Yeah, dude, good to have you back. Great to see you, as always. So, Will, you've been on the podcast before quite a while ago. Would you just remind the listeners who you are in case they haven't heard of you?
Great. So I'm a psychiatrist by training. I have practiced for almost 20 years. I have maybe 20,000 hours of experience in that. And when I started to see the conventional training that I had was really falling short for a lot of people, I started getting better tools, and then I eventually started an institute to teach other people how to do that. So my career has really been about trying to find better solutions for people with serious mental health challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, why is this conversation relevant right now, would you say?
Well, gosh, there's so many different aspects of that. I mean, I feel like, first of all, we are seeing the wheels come off of the psychopharmacology model, which is the conventional psychiatry model. According to estimates, 300 million people in the world with depression, for example, and 100 million. So 1/3 of the people with serious depression in the world are not getting a result with medications.
Wow.
So that's a big number. There's all kinds of other things I could say about that, but I think that probably captures it.
Yeah, that's significant as hell. Okay, well, I want to dive into depression a little bit, but before we kind of get into that, how are you and the people you work with and the faculty you train? How's everybody holding up with this whole coronavirus and social distancing and just the economy? There's a lot of stressors right now for people. I'm just curious how you're doing and how everyone that you're in contact with is doing.
I would say that people are extremely stressed right now. I mean, I know I feel that in my system, and it's interesting to look for that kind of social regulation or interpersonal regulation through video, through voice, through the social distancing over the airways. And I think some people are more experienced with that than others. It seems like the younger generation, like my daughter and her friends, are, they're always on their devices. So I think especially for older people, people older than us, it's really challenging right now.
Yeah.
On the social side. I mean, there's all the financial stress and all of the other, kind of really literal, physical, medical crisis stress. It's on top of that. But in terms of staying regulated, I mean, I think sticking together and having, we had a virtual cocktail party with my wife's parents a couple nights ago, and that was pretty fun.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been FaceTiming with my folks more lately. Yeah, it's nice. Do you, I'm curious, like, are you, gosh, I have so many questions for you, Will. I'm just going to kind of jump around here. Can you unpack like integrative care and integrative psychiatry right now, just so we can define that, because we're going to be talking a lot about that. And then I want to talk about kind of how that applies to right now in the world.
Yeah, right on. So the conventional view and what I was taught and, what I learned and what I began to practice when I got out of residency and found was so inadequate is basically a view that symptoms equal illness. So if you have 5 out of 9 of a symptom list, let's say for depression, for example, then you have that disease. And there's no specialty anywhere in medicine where you're not looking for the root cause of the problem. So in the conventional mindset in psychiatry is really just naming the surface level and not looking under the hood for the answers for why that presentation is happening. So the integrative perspective, the word integrative could be confusing for people. There are different ways to define it, but essentially the way I look at it is integrative means not only are we looking at root causes, so we're not just taking the person with depression and then suicidal thinking, we're looking at the root cause. And we could get into, let's say 24 or so common root causes of that presentation of depression. But we're also looking at the integrated view of the person. So we're looking at the mind, body, and lifestyle. Some people would say mind, body, spirit. This is kind of biopsychosocial, going further than that. So we have a reaction to conventional medicine, which people largely call functional medicine. So it's kind of alternative medicine, it's functional medicine. And there's an institute that trains people in how to look at the root causes, the biochemical pathways, and the gut-brain connection and stuff like that, which is really cool. Yeah. So that's the new development beyond conventional medicine. But the problem that I have with the functional medicine approach is that it doesn't account for the psychology or for the piece of interpersonal neurobiology and trauma that you speak to your audience about a lot. So this is the Dan Siegel, the Stan Tatkin, this is the Peter Levine, Gabor, Dig Schwartz, Gabor, right. So what I think is really interesting is when you take a message that Andy Weil has been promoting for a long time, which I would call lifestyle medicine, meditation, exercise, diet, sleep, and you combine that with awareness and technology that works for trauma, and we could talk about psychedelics in that conversation as well. And then you take functional medicine and personalized medicine, genetic medicine, and you put that all together, then you've got something really potent that I think covers a lot of the territory.
Yeah, and that's what you're up to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so cool. So would you try to summarize that as that's integrative medicine? Would that be fair?
I would say so. I mean, I hesitated a little bit because I was thinking, is that integrative mental health care or is that integrative medicine? I think it's integrative medicine per se, because you can't argue that adverse childhood experiences are irrelevant to medical care.
Yeah.
The primary care doctors I know and pediatricians estimate 80% of their visits are mental health related. So I don't think you can separate out a gut problem or a heart problem or a liver problem from someone's psychology or from their lifestyle.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my own recent work, which around my own gut health, has taken me on quite a journey here of learning. And it's so interesting when I go see different practitioners, and we've talked about this. Well, none of them ask me really about my psychology or my history or my marriage or my relationships. And they're more kind of functional / Western medicine or naturopathic medicine type folks that I'm seeing. And I think that's missing another huge aspect here, another piece of the puzzle. And I'm just always appreciating you because it seems like with the work you're doing and the training you're doing with all these doctors, it's saying, hey, actually there's even more that we could include in our questions. There's more that we could include in getting to know someone. There's a whole relationship here. There's a history around trauma, et cetera. So, yeah, and I guess my question is, well, why are so many medical professionals who treat mental health and physical health, why do they not talk to each other, and why do they not integrate? Why does everybody kind of do their own thing? Like, what is that about human behavior, or like what's going on here?
Well, I think there are a couple of things going on. I mean, for one thing, we have an overwhelmed medical system where people are always behind, writing notes after seeing 20 patients in a day. If you're in more of a conventional model, or even if you're in an integrative model. And I mean, I used to see 8 or 10 people a day. And it's brutal, to try to actually get all your work done. And then after that, you've got calls to make to coordinate care. So, I mean, I know what it feels like to be in the seat that you're describing of the practitioner who didn't make that phone call that he should have made. It's overwhelming and stressful to work in that environment. But the other issue that, some people have talked about, Gabor Mate in particular, is the trauma that lives inside of the hearts of medical practitioners. And, we don't do enough to educate medical students and residents and early career medical providers in general, let alone psychiatrists, about the importance of resolving your own trauma and dealing with it. And it's a missing piece.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm speaking from experience again, when you have a blind spot where you don't even know that you're traumatized, you're not going to recognize in other people what you don't see in yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm remembering, I think I first kind of learned of what doctors really go through in medical school and residency in Bob Scare's book. I think it was Bob Scare's book.
Yeah.
Trauma. What was that book called? Trauma in the Body or something?
The Body Bears the Burden.
Yeah. It's a good one. And then, becoming friends with you many years ago and having these conversations, I as a patient, really client of many doctors over much of my life, that was really enlightening for me to hear, to think of the demands that they go through. And then there's the childhood experiences that they went through that had them become a doctor, perhaps, right? And then they get thrown into maybe conventional care where they're seeing too many people and not enough time. How am I supposed to learn more, right? And there's actually are supposed to learn more because they have boards and different exams to keep up on their licensure, right? And so that's helping me understand just like how overwhelmed maybe medical practitioners are. And even right now in this moment, nurses and doctors just getting inundated with people having symptoms, right? It's just like, holy shit.
Well, it's the American medical system for training is based on a military style education, and the level of shaming that goes on is intense. And, the shamers are, if anything, more traumatized than the ones who are being shamed by them. And so it's just this perpetual shame machine that just keeps churning out traumatized people. Yeah.
And then I can see them getting so triggered by their patients, right? Because they're in that orbit, in that vortex.
Sure. Well, and I mean, your question about, why don't they get more education on this type of material, like an integrative perspective? There's a huge level of fear in traditional practitioners of going out on a limb and, let's say, recommending something like fish oil, which people like you and me sounds like a pretty middle of the road, pretty conservative thing to recommend. But even that triggers fear for a lot of people, that they're going to get put on quack.com or they're going to quackwatch.com or one of these websites that outs doctors who are doing crazy things for people. And
crazy meaning like slightly unconventional and maybe effective.
Exactly. Well, meaning like something that doesn't have a double-blind placebo-controlled trial.
Yeah, no research backing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like we had a webinar a couple of weeks ago in our institute from this amazing guy named Chris Palmer from Harvard, and he mentioned, and I'd forgotten this, but he mentioned in his talk that only 12% of the mental health conditions that are in DSM-5 even have an approved treatment for them.
Oh my God.
But the prevailing view, the crazy prevailing view is like, oh, you're doing something that's not evidence-based. And it's like, okay, but if you combine 2 medications in one patient or 3 medications in one patient, which is like unbelievably common in psychiatry, you're already off the ranch as far as evidence-based. There's no studies on putting someone on 2 or 3 meds at the same time, but nobody questions that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like this really intense illogical, kind of fear-based. And so anyway, I mean, it's my position is, look, let's know what the evidence actually is, and let's have an intelligent conversation about it, rather than declaring war on each other because we're in so much fear about getting put on some kind of watch list.
Totally. Wow. That's helpful to hear. I didn't know that. I mean, it makes sense though, right? If I'm raised in a system that's shaming, like a medical system, and then I in turn shame undergrads or new people coming in, and then my patients aren't complying, and then I might shame them in my head if I don't do it directly. Now I can't step outside of what I've learned because I've worked so hard for it, because then I might get shamed also there.
Right. Well, because the continuing education inside of a conventional model doesn't include things like this, because there's no funding from an entrepreneur to prove to do the research of it would take to quote unquote prove that omega-3 fatty acids are good for, let's say, bipolar or depression.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're available over the counter and they're generic and, et cetera. So
I'm curious, Will,
same problem with ketamine, actually.
Yeah. I know we're going to get into ketamine here in a second. I'm curious how you broke out of that system, because I would think that's pretty intense to differentiate oneself from kind of a network that says we're all going to agree to do this, and if you step outside of the lines, we're going to shame you and report you even. I'm curious how, and it's probably a long story, but can you just give us a little whiff of that story of like how you broke out enough and had the courage to begin to use supplements, for example?
Well, I think my story is one that a lot of integrative practitioners can relate to, because it's one where I had my own health journey, and it started in 2000. Let's see, it was 2004. It was about a year and a half after I got out of my residency, and I drove down from Colorado down to Arizona to take my psychiatry boards, and got the results back and passed the boards. And then in the meantime, in my practice, I had a private practice where I had people building up in my practice who weren't getting better from all the things that I was taught to do for them. I was, cognitive behavioral therapy, SSRIs. At that time, I thought I was a maverick because I was teaching people to meditate. I mean, that felt pretty out there,
right?
In 2002 and 3. And then and in the meantime, so the personal health side was, I was struggling with a lot of irritability, and my relationship was kind of off and on, off the rails. I mean, some of those details from being a friend of mine at that time. And I was seeing a naturopath, and he kept telling me that if I stopped eating gluten, then I would probably be less irritable. And he had been telling me that for about 5 years. And I continued to just eat a conventional diet. And, I was a doctor and I had never learned anything. We didn't even have one 1 hour lecture in medical school about diet. Wow. And how that could impact health.
Wow.
And I have physician friends who, they do their shopping at King Soopers, and, they think organic is a hoax. And, I mean, people in Boulder who are like that. It's really amazing. So anyway, I had a simultaneous implosion of like my own health and needing to figure that out. And then at the same time, my practice was just incredibly frustrating and discouraging, because I was doing all the things that I learned to do, and it just, worked for some people, which is great, but most people were not getting better from the things I had learned to do. So meanwhile, I had a Buddhist teacher who, and he was setting up shop in a little town in Colorado. So I said, okay, I'm going to take a year off. But, in reality, I actually psychologically was like, okay, I'm done with medicine. I'm going to figure something else out. At the time, I had no intention of coming back to practicing medicine. I was just so disgusted and discouraged. And then I stopped eating gluten when I moved. And then at the same time, a few months later, I ran into a former patient, and some of my students have heard this story before, but it's an interesting story. So I'll summarize it. I ran into a former patient on the street, and he said to me, look, and he was a guy who was one of these people who had not gotten better from the treatments I gave him. And he said, look, I went outside of your practice. I got tested for celiac. I came back positive. I stopped eating gluten. All of my panic attacks and agoraphobia and traveling anxiety went away, melted away over a few months. I stopped the medications you had me on. I still had no anxiety. And now I've started a gluten-free business. Things are going great.
Wow.
That girl I was scared to date, I asked her out. We're getting married. Everything was going well. And I checked in with him. That was, like I said, that was more than 15 years ago. I checked in with him last year so I could tell this story, and he's still doing well.
Mm-hmm.
So and then my irritability went down when I stopped eating wheat. And so that was where I really just realized, okay, nobody knew to tell me these things. It's not like it wasn't a conspiracy. Nobody was withholding this education from me. It just wasn't there. It wasn't part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
So that's when I went on a kind of a tear of doing CME activities, going to weekends, doing trainings. I got somatic experiencing training with Peter Levine. I went to a workshop with Gabor Mate. I did functional medicine training, and I learned how to balance hormones and deal with inflammation in the body. And then I started trying these things out, and I have to tip my hat to my patients who worked with me on being willing to be guinea pigs and try things out with me that I hadn't done before with anybody else. And, we definitely had some misadventures, but we got people well who I wouldn't have been able to get well otherwise. And it was remarkable how much less I was relying on medication.
Wow.
From learning how to do this. So, to your question about how did I deal with the fear? I was afraid. I had this one experience where I had run a saliva kit for adrenal testing on a patient who I thought had adrenal fatigue. And he was seeing an endocrinologist in town. And I knew that the conventional endocrinologist didn't agree with these saliva tests for cortisol levels. So, unbeknownst to me, he took his saliva cortisol test to the conventional endocrinologist, and he showed it to him. And then the patient came back to my office and shared what happened in the visit. And he said, I think it's malpractice that your doctor ordered that.
Wow.
So, that's the level of concern and fear and worry, and later on, when I started getting referrals from that endocrinologist for care that I provided, I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah. Things are changing.
Yeah, that's great. So would you say, as you made your journey there and kind of what I'm hearing is you started experimenting. You were courageous enough to experiment, go take classes, learn more, kind of step outside the norms and the lines and conventions to get the kind of information you wanted to try to experiment with. And it started working. People started getting well, more people than normally or before, right? And so you didn't toss medication out the window, the sort of more traditional pharmacology, or did you?
No, not at all. And that's another important aspect of defining integrative care. I think integrative includes, a different definition of integrative is conventional, plus acknowledging that there are actually other ways of doing things that may also be really valid. Mm-hmm. If you look at Western medicine in the context of world medicine, you look at shamanism being around for at least 11,000 years. You've got Chinese medicine for at least 2,000 years. You got all kinds of other traditions that we don't even know about, probably most of them or all of them. It kind of puts Western medicine in a context. And, we have this incredibly powerful system that's so great for certain things. Like, if I break a bone or I have a heart attack, I'm going straight to the hospital and I'm going to get great care. And I'm psyched. I'm so psyched. But one of the problems that we have is that most of our illness is chronic illness, and it's driven by inflammation. And the conventional system is not good at dealing with chronic care.
Yeah.
Chronic conditions.
Yeah. Yeah, they're good at more acute stuff, is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Especially something like a broken arm. It's like, oh, we kind of know what to do with that. But something like really abstract, obtuse, nebulous inflammation that we don't really know where it's stemming from is much harder.
Exactly.
Remember, folks, our Accepted and Connected event is coming up virtually, so you can be right at home, anywhere in the world, and join us. May 28th. All right, this is going to change your life. It's all about conflict and how to work through it. Here's what Jonah said.
I started listening to Jason's podcast a few years ago because I just felt stuck in some of my relationships, and just recently realized that I keep bumping up against some of the same patterns and blockages in the ways that I cope with conflict in relationship. Despite all of my attempts to break those patterns, I keep repeating them and really not allowing myself to stay in the conflict and to experience the emotions that go along with it and work through those emotions instead of ejecting. And heard about this workshop and thought it'd be a great opportunity to identify specifically those patterns and find ways to work through them and rewire them for myself. I would absolutely recommend the Accepted and Connected course just as a primer for looking at how we experience relationships and how we experience conflict. The biggest thing that I'm going to walk away with is the experience of having the opportunity to hold myself accountable for the role that I play.
All right, there you have it from Jonah. He worked hard and is transforming his life because of this work. Thanks, Jonah. All right, go to relationshipschool.com/connected if you want to register. Early bird, super early bird deal is going away fast. All right, back to the podcast. Why is the psychology and childhood trauma stuff so important? Because there's, again, so many people I'm kind of studying and working with don't even mention that. And a lot of people get results, of course, without ever touching that. And other people, patients, let's say, don't get any results with their practitioner, functional medicine practitioner, whoever, because of that. So can you speak to where sort of childhood trauma and relationship trauma and injury plays into inflammation and then what happens and manifests as an adult?
Absolutely. So we have, and this comes courtesy of a CU professor named Chris Lowry, who educated me about this. He's amazing, by the way. Have you had him on your show?
No, but I watched his talk in your conference. Yep. Yeah,
nice. So Chris is one of the American Gut Project people who has done incredible things with gut inflammation and microbiome diversity and the kind of signaling and the immune system that comes from that. But what is cool about Chris is that he understands that the root of inflammation can also come from abuse and neglect and childhood trauma as well. So he turned me on to these studies that happened in the UK where they did prospective analysis of people who had had childhood maltreatment, is what they called it over there. Massive studies, like 2,000, 3,000 people in the study, and they looked at inflammation markers like IL-6 and CRP, C-reactive protein. So these are generalized markers of inflammation that are indicative of immune system dysregulation. And what they found was that people who had childhood trauma have persistent elevations of these markers of inflammation into their adulthood. And so and then we also know from the adverse childhood event studies and the medical outcomes from people who have high scores on the ACE questionnaire that their rates of autoimmune disease are way higher, and their rates of chronic disease are much higher, and it's mediated through inflammation as well. So basically, if your immune system Well, if your attachment system is dysregulated in childhood, then you're going to have an immune system impact on that can be persistent
Yeah.
until you've worked through your stuff.
Yeah, that's enormous. And so what would an integrative doctor recommend there?
Yeah. So if you saw if you saw an integrative practitioner who had more of this functional medicine training without being trauma informed, then they would probably give you curcumin or quercetin, or they'd put you on an anti-inflammatory diet or that kind of thing. Or they might even do some really cool stuff like low dose naltrexone or things to reduce brain inflammation. But the problem is if it's coming from trauma, if it's coming from a filter that the person's wearing in relationship that automatically assumes they're going to have a negative experience from a social interaction, as opposed to believing that there's something good that can come from that,
Mm-hmm.
then you're basically just putting water on the fire, but you keep putting logs on the fire too. So you're actually not getting to the root of the problem.
Yeah.
And, my experience in working with a lot of people over a long period of time in this way is that usually the people I see have kind of physiologic body level. They might even have genetic SNPs that make them more prone to inflammation, mutations. But they also have childhood trauma. And when you put those two things together, then you've got a recipe that you need to deal with all the roots.
I mean, it's such a different look than, oh, you're feeling bad. Here, talk to me for a minute, and then here's this medication that will hopefully make it go away. It's radically different. What you're talking about.
Different.
I mean, what you're talking about, to me, is definitely a lot more work to investigate and ask the right questions and really try to understand the symptoms and the root of all those symptoms. I mean, even just my own gut health right now, it's a maze to try to figure out like what's going on here, right? Unfortunately, I'm working with my psychology around that. And man, I've been eating like crap for years, and then I had my own adverse childhood stuff happen, which I know had an impact on my inflammation. So, it's a journey one has to make, and I wonder sometimes if that's also not that attractive to people because there's a journey to make, right? Versus a pill to take.
Right. Well, the cool thing is you can take the pill and make the journey. You can do both. You don't have to do one or the other. And, I think it's really important to mitigate symptoms while we're looking for the root causes. But I think the problem is the story that the reduction in symptoms equals the resolution of the problem.
Right.
That's where I think people get lulled to sleep.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think I'd love you to speak to this because I have my own sort of bias around medication. And I know you're right in that it helps some people, and why not make the journey some of the time with medication. And it seems to me, most of the people I've seen over the years that are on medication, it's also having a bigger impact on their inability to feel their direct experience, which then impacts the feedback loop that would wake them up to make the journey.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to be in enough pain to actually be willing to commit to for you, like a radical diet change, right? I mean, there's a certain amount of suffering that's required to motivate us.
Yeah, that's true for me.
I mean, I've told people before, look, I remember this one situation in my clinic years ago where I was working with a college kid, and I said, look, I don't think you're suffering enough. I think you need to come back when you are.
Yeah.
Because you're not ready.
Yeah.
For this.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've said that to folks too. We'll talk about the role of psychedelics and ketamine in integrative care, because that's another treatment modality here that I think is proving to be pretty exciting in terms of what they're learning, some of the early results. And we talked about that. We talked about MDMA-assisted psychotherapy on one of our podcasts together. So will you kind of give us the update on psychedelics, the research, ketamine? Where are things at today, 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just put in one more plug for conventional medications.
Okay, cool.
Before we switch to that topic. I was just going to say there is an art to using very low doses of things, like, giving someone a homeopathic dose of, let's say, Zoloft, to cut the edge of their anxiety or their depression enough that they can actually get their running shoes on and go out and go around the block instead of just staying in bed, without numbing them out so much that they have, they get into that kind of SSRI apathy syndrome that all of us who use those medications a lot have seen, where someone just doesn't care anymore. Their life is still a huge mess, but they just don't have any desire to change it anymore. I mean, that's where you can tell, if you're a good clinician, that you've overdosed the person, if they're actually not interested in making a healing journey. So I just the way I teach other practitioners, and what I like to do in my practice is, give somebody enough of it's like enough of a boost that they can actually make the journey, but not so much that it just it derails them off of their journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Thanks for that reminder.
Yeah. So in regards to what's happening with psychedelic research, it's a really interesting time right now. Obviously, we have multiple phase 3 trials going on. We've got psilocybin on the way for depression. We've got MDMA on the way for PTSD. And there's lots of other little things going on the sides around smaller trials, investigating little things. But one of the big challenges is going to be implementation. And I think it's going to be, I think after we find out, I feel pretty confident that we're going to find out that MDMA psychotherapy is highly effective for PTSD. I think we're going to find out psilocybin, supported psychotherapy is really effective for depression. It's going to be a game changer, but it's going to be really hard to implement for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. And what about ketamine?
So we provide ketamine in our clinic. I stand for that because the outcomes data is so incredibly superior to conventional antidepressants. The trouble with ketamine is making the benefits stick, which is something that's kind of an ongoing process of experimentation. And we don't have a good solution yet for that. And so as a result of not having a clear sort of reductionistic solution to that, which would be more of the conventional style looking at it, like ketamine XR or something like that. We look at, okay, let's use the ketamine as an opportunity to address your gut issues and your relationship issues and your diet, your exercise program, et cetera. So, when we treat people with ketamine, usually they're pretty debilitated with their depression. They're not able to do anything. And so we're trying to weave that into a more integrative framework in our clinic.
Yeah. And tell just to back up a step, what's ketamine again for people that are new to that?
Yeah. So ketamine was approved in 1970 as an anesthetic. It's kind of an interesting story that there were other anesthetics prior to that caused people to be violent as they were coming out of the anesthesia. And so ketamine was a spinoff of a previous compound that made it much more mellow when the anesthesia wore off. So after that, it became very widely used by, for example, it's on the top 10 most essential medications for the World Health Organization. It's carried by medics in a combat setting. It basically, outside of the anesthesia, nobody knew that it was effective in regards to depression until this guy named Berman published a paper in 2000. And then it got picked up by National Institutes of Mental Health, and a number of studies were done in the early 2000s looking at IV ketamine as a treatment for depression. And then the smaller studies show basically 70 to 80% treatment response with ketamine, which is more than double what you typically see in a conventional antidepressant response rate in a trial.
Yeah.
Now, by the time ketamine was studied for depression, it was way off label, so it's generic. So there really wasn't any money to be made on ketamine in terms of assigning it an indication for depression through FDA. But then a company came out and filtered ketamine into the left-handed ketamine and the right-handed ketamine. We might be going too far down the rabbit hole here, but this company named the left-handed ketamine Spravato, and they were able to get a phase 3 study done, and they got FDA approval for depression as a nasal spray. So there is an approved ketamine for depression, but it's only the left-handed, and it's only used as a nasal spray.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you guys do IV ketamine, is that right?
Correct.
And okay, so and then what are the results from your firsthand experience in your clinic? What are you seeing?
So we like numbers to measure outcomes. It's kind of fun for us.
Yeah.
So we do these scales that are used in research to see how severe the depression is at the beginning, and then same scale at the end and measure the difference. And so there's a scale called the Beck Depression Scale, and an extreme case of depression, the number is over 40. A severe case is over 30. Most of the clinical trials for the conventional antidepressants, they started at, say, 25 or like that.
Okay.
So we see people who usually will start out at a Beck score of like in the high 30s or low 40s, so very severe.
Yeah.
And it's pretty common to see people come down to low teens or even single digits after 6 ketamine sessions IV.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's a very life-changing experience after 6 ketamine sessions spread out over 3 weeks. So it's a lot for people to adjust to when they've been severely depressed for months or years.
Oh my God, it's like got to be like turning the lights on or something, right?
It's a lot to integrate.
Yeah.
So the integration piece is really important for making the results stick.
Yeah, I love that you guys do that. And again, it's just an IV shot somewhere in the body, and then I've heard it's like I've done ketamine, a short session, but it's like a psychedelic journey in some people's eyes, and in other people's eyes, that's not what it's like. How would you just describe it in a nutshell for people?
Right. So we have therapists who work with our ketamine clients. That's our preferred way to do it. Because of what you're talking about. It is like a psychedelic journey. It's, for some people, really positive. People go toward the light. They can connect with the universe or with God. They, can feel great. But then other people have really dark and scary experiences. And some people even connect in with memories of trauma that they have suppressed or that they emphasized in their lives. So we look at those challenges as massive opportunities for healing for people. So that's why we want the therapists to be there who have trauma-informed treatment approaches and can really help people integrate the material that comes up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It seems like, could we lump ketamine in with psychedelics? Is that fair or not? Is it in its own class?
Technically, so there's a technical definition for psychedelics, which is that psilocybin, LSD, ayahuasca, those kinds of things directly interact with the serotonin 5-HT2A receptor. So that's a very technical neuroscience-y way to define a psychedelic. Mm-hmm. Ketamine doesn't work on that receptor system in the brain, which is one of the reasons that actually makes it really interesting as a tool, because if your tool interacts with that receptor system in the brain, then you've got another big problem, which is that the person can't be on any serotonin impacting drugs and do that psychedelic. So ketamine is a glutamate receptor tool, which again, from a pharmacology perspective, is very interesting, because why does it work on depression? Because we have this kind of indoctrination from marketing campaigns from pharmaceutical companies that people with depression have a serotonin deficiency. Well, now we have a tool in ketamine that actually doesn't work on serotonin at all, at least not directly. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting that it also unravels this story, really, that no legitimate neuroscientist would ever really agree with, that serotonin is the problem in depressed people.
That's so interesting. Are you saying that when ketamine is taken, that serotonin isn't impacted at all, or it's just not a direct sort of impact? Like, what are you saying there?
So, again, from a better informed neuroscience perspective, all neurotransmitters affect all neurotransmitters. So we're talking about networks, right? So, but when you work directly on a serotonin receptor, and I'm talking about traditional psychedelics here, and then you've got a person who's also on, let's say, Prozac, when they take the psychedelic, then you can end up having a serotonin syndrome. You could have a medical crisis. So it's something that's considered really dangerous to do. The people that we often treat with ketamine come in on a number of different medications. And, when I had an experience that we talked about last time of working in a clinical trial and giving people MDMA in a clinical trial, we had to take everybody off of all their medications, especially the serotonin ones,
right?
In order to keep them safe, to give them MDMA. But with ketamine, we can bring people in, and there's only a couple of medications that we would have to taper down, but people don't have to come off of things in order to take ketamine, which is really nice.
Yeah, that's why when I did ayahuasca a bunch in the past, there was always a questionnaire, usually if it was a responsible setting, saying, are you on any SSRIs, right? Are you on any medication?
Exactly.
Cool, that helps me understand. All right, and then in terms of, why is just kind of last question here on this with psychedelics, why is it so important that we have a sitter or integration with a psychotherapist, a trained guide? Why is that so key if we're going to go down the road of psychedelics to try to heal something in ourselves?
Well, I think the idea that psychedelics' chemical benefit is what does the healing is a misunderstanding. In other words, the kind of work that psychedelics can unlock, the kind of psychotherapy healing work, the kind of somatic healing work that can happen when you take the default mode network offline for a while, is where the action is, in my opinion. So another way to say that is, it reminds me, that kind of view about psychedelics, that taking the LSD or taking the psilocybin or taking the MDMA actually does the healing, is just a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
I know people who have done literally hundreds of psychedelic experiences in a recreational way with no guidance, with no intention to heal something, who are just as beleaguered by unresolved trauma as a person who hasn't done any psychedelics.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's really interesting that a tool like that behaves so differently in a therapeutic setting.
I know, right?
It's almost like it's a different chemical.
Yeah. It seems like it's something about the intention, set and setting, and also another person, like being present with you in that experience. All my psychedelic experiences, pre-working on myself, kind of many of them bad trips or good trips, but like little windows into things, I had no one there really that I could talk to or integrate with. And so it was just a bad trip, or it was just it was the acid, or it was and actually it was just helping me unlock unconscious memories that I had no idea what to do with.
Right. Exactly. And we didn't know what to do with them when the event was happening.
Right.
And that's what created the trauma.
Right. Here I am alone again.
Yeah, I'm alone again. I'm frozen. I don't understand what to do. I don't even understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And so having that calm presence of a guide, just basically saying, you got this, and let's move through this together,
Man, it's just so powerful. Just to think about, that's such the power of healing trauma or attachment injuries is just another human being, like a relationship, right? That's there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And if you think about it, that's exactly what's happening between an infant and a mother in regulation, is like, the infant is having massive dysregulation, and that's being put into the pool of regulation of the parent. And the dysregulation just dispels into the pool of regulation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, there's a whole nother level of like training it seems like we need to give to all the people doing psychedelics out there, whether it's recreationally or medically, and just the attachment frame and the relationship frame and the presence frame is so important, I think, here.
Absolutely. And that's part of what I'm saying when I say that the real issue is going to be implementation of these tools, because, well, for a number of reasons. I mean, there's the business aspect of that's really challenging in terms of getting therapists paid adequately to do all those hours of psychedelic therapy that it takes.
Yeah.
But then there's also a really significant challenge, which is how do you train enough psychedelic sitters or therapists through having their own healing experiences?
Yeah, right.
Because once again, I go back to what the conversation we had at the very beginning of the physicians who haven't had a chance to really resolve their own trauma, and then they're not able to recognize it in their patients. It's the same problem for a psychedelic sitter. If they haven't become really confident or at least familiar with their own extreme states, how do they make room for holding space for the extreme state in front of them?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Totally. Wow. Okay. Well, I have so many more questions, but I want to respect your time. We'll wind down. I just want to kind of tie in mental health here. Do you feel like, I mean, it's so exciting really to talk about this and to talk about integrative care, and that we're getting kind of smarter and deeper in our treatment modalities as the world maybe gets more complicated. Certainly, we've got a really challenging time in this moment as we record this with the virus and the economy. And would you say, like, how would you assess mental health? Like, are we getting more mental health savvy? Are we treating mental health better? Are we not doing so hot with mental health? Like, where do we stand as a culture?
Well, I think before we entered this crazy time that we're in right now, we're losing ground every day. I mean, that's, I mean, the rates of the known cases, I've been glued to the internet looking at the escalating cases of coronavirus. I mean, you could see statistics on mental health challenges similarly, even before the coronavirus came in, right? Of week after month after year of more and more cases globally of depression, PTSD, et cetera. So, we're not doing a good job of making a dent in mental health.
Yeah. And what would you say, like, in terms of the integrative lens, it seems like that's pretty exciting or new, or we are making progress or inroads there, because it's I mean, so many of the podcasts I listen to with the biohacking community and these health communities, I mean, they're getting close to starting to include psychology and trauma, but they're not quite there. But just with what you're doing with your doctors and showing doctors there's actually more available. There's another way to work with not only symptoms, but root causes. I'm just curious how you feel about all that.
Well, I think that psychedelics might become a bridge between these two communities. That's kind of how I'm looking at it now, is that it's interesting. When I go to psychedelic conferences, nobody's talking about integrative medicine. And when I go to integrative medicine conferences, not very many people are talking about psychedelics. So we kind of, I'm hoping that the psychology conversation you're talking about will become much more available through all of the conversation that's happening around psychedelics right now. Because, when people talk about MDMA and clinical trials or psilocybin in clinical trials, really they're talking about mental health, because that's what's being studied there.
Totally.
So I hope that, that we're going to see more attention to root causes of mental health issues through that. But my concern is that once again, we get into a reductionist conventional perspective about psychedelics. And it's going to be interesting to see how FDA relates to the idea of whether or not they approve psychotherapy with MDMA or psychotherapy with psilocybin, they've never had to face this challenge before. It's always been, okay, does this chemical work or not?
Right, right. Wow. Cool. Okay. Where can people find you? I know you have a clinic here locally in Boulder, and then you also are training doctors to become integrative care providers. So will you tell us about both of those?
Thanks. So our clinic in Boulder can be found at psychiatrycenters.com. That's plural, so psychiatrycenters.com. And then our institute, if you're interested in training, is found at psychiatryinstitute.com.
Awesome. And you run a fellowship there, a year-long training for docs?
Yes. So we have a year-long fellowship. It's almost entirely online. It looks like in the coming year, it might be entirely online.
Right.
And our current fellowship has over 100 providers, mostly MDs, some nurse practitioners in it. And, we're really excited to see the impact of how people are taking this back to their practices or, developing integrative skills. And, it feels good to be involved in this revolution in mental health care.
Yeah. Fuck yeah. Thanks for being a trailblazer.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, cool. One last question, and then I'll let you go. I ask all my guests this, so I thought I'd ask you. As you know, one of our goals is to reach 1 million teens and young adults with relationship education. And so if I had a room full of 1,000 teenagers and I could only share one thing with them about relationships, and you were whispering in my ear, what would you want me to tell them?
Wow. It gets better. I mean, it can get a lot better. I mean, I remember myself as a teenager and how brutal my social anxiety was. I mean, and had no idea how stressed out I was. And the teens I know nowadays, massive levels of anxiety about being included, excluded, bullied on Snapchat. I mean, you name it. It's really hard to be a teenager. So, I mean, that's the first thing, is it gets better. I guess the second thing is, stay curious, keep learning, open your mind, read things. There's a lot to learn. Listen to Jason's podcast. I would encourage them to come to you for sure.
Right on. Cool. Well, thanks for being a great friend and teacher here to us, and I appreciate all that you're doing in the world.
Thanks, Jason. Great to be here again, and looking forward to more.
Cool. All right, Will Vanderveer. That was amazing. Dr. Will Vanderveer is an incredible human and practitioner. The guy is relentless about turning over his own material, looking at himself in the mirror as a way to help other people. And he's helped thousands and thousands of people. So cool what this guy's up to. So go check out him and my friend Keith at the Integrative Psychiatric Institute. If you are a nurse or a doctor and you're considering, additional training, these guys would be, I would just highly recommend checking them out. Their year-long fellowship. They've got people like Gabor Mate teaching for them, and all these incredible functional medicine people and doctors, psychiatrists. It's just really revolutionary what they're doing. Okay, so go check them out. And then when I'm so curious what resonated for you here. But one thing I am reminded of through Will's story is eliminating something like gluten from your diet can have dramatic impact on your well-being, your focus, your clarity. It is the source of a lot of people's gut problems. From the limited areas that I study, I'm also healing my gut, and there's tremendous wisdom in what he's saying. So my action step for you is more on the diet side, just for fun, as an experiment. Eliminate gluten for a month out of your world and just see if anything changes. Okay. You want to go a step further, eliminate grains completely out of your diet just to see what happens. I think it's pretty incredible if you research and study nutrition right now in the biohacking community. And at some point I can share some resources if you guys want, in terms of what's working, from a ketogenic diet to carnivore diet to plant-based diets. All these different groups of people are having really cool results by drilling down on diet as a way to improve your life. So I think it's just another component. We don't talk ever really about it here on the podcast because it's not my jam. But I think it is an important part of mental health. Okay. And then finally, if you know of someone who is struggling with a mental health issue, challenge, I would forward this episode to them. Okay. That's just another small action step you can do. Try to help them by saying, you know what, maybe you should look at a non-traditional approach, an integrative approach to healing. And look, there's plenty of people that would rather take the medication than do the work, or would rather just have their doctor tell them what to do, and then they don't have to learn anything. I get it. I wouldn't necessarily forward it to those people because they're just going to resist it and not listen anyway. But you know what I'm talking about. Okay. As I said in the commercial, we have our Accepted and Connected event coming up. Go to relationshipschool.com/connected to get the details on our upcoming workshop in late May. It's virtual, so you can do it right from home. Okay, guys? And it's going to be a lot of fun, and you're going to learn some pivotal skills that are going to help you navigate difficult conversations and conflict, because that's the crux of any long-term relationship, conflict, or the inability or unwillingness to work through it. Okay? relationshipschool.com/connected, and we'll see you there. All right, take care, everybody. Stay healthy, stay strong. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Relationship School fans and Smart Couple listeners, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, all right? Do us a favor, subscribe, share one of these videos with a friend, all right? We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.